All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zach Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Xandra. Xandra is a conversation design studio that creates interactive experiences using artificial intelligence technologies like smart speakers, including Amazon Alexa devices. Just a quick show of hands here. How many of you have actually used an Alexa skill that's lasted more than, say, 30 seconds? 2 minutes? Okay, there's been a lot of talk during these last few days about voice technology enabling kind of discrete and utilitarian interactions. This is a very different type of a presentation. So I'll let Tim introduce himself, and then we'll kind of talk through what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, cool. Hey, everyone, I'm Tim Adams. I work for Viacom Media Networks, so that's the parent company of brands like Nickelodeon, MTV, Comedy Central. And I head up the Emerging Digital Products Group, so we focus on kind of where our fans are going to be playing next. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today.
Just before I go on, I wanted to put another piece of information about what we do. So we work very closely with partners like Viacom to create these really immersive, interactive, kind of gaming, narrative type of experiences on Alexa. So you might have heard of some of the projects that we've done. We worked with HBO to create the Westworld skill. It's the most highly awarded Alexa skill ever produced. It's got 40 as of today and counting, major international awards. And we worked with Sesame Street to create the Esme and Roy Alexa skill, which was nominated for an Emmy. What we're going to talk about today, specifically, is about the SpongeBob challenge. But first, we're going to put it in the context of Viacom's approach to voice and how they think about voice relative to some of their really high-value properties, including Nickelodeon and SpongeBob. We'll talk in detail about kind of how Nickelodeon approached the SpongeBob project specifically. We'll go into a demo, a short kind of experience to get you to feel what it's like to play with a more kind of narrative gaming type of an Alexa experience. And then I'm going to talk about how we approach conversation design, both from a kind of philosophical standpoint as well as how we integrate it into our practice. And then we'll cap off with some learnings so far and some closing thoughts.
Great. All right, so when SpongeBob met Alexa, I'll talk to you a little bit about, as Zach mentioned, our project, the SpongeBob Challenge, which was the first Nickelodeon skill we built for Alexa, and talk you through kind of how we got there. So backing up a bit, for Viacom and for brands like Nickelodeon, MTV, Comedy Central, the promise of voice is really high, right? So our goal really in every instance of new technology and new entertainment formats is to meet our audiences where they are. And we know now that about 100 million Alexa devices have been sold in the US alone. So, and that adoption of Alexa and voice assistance is faster than the adoption of mobile. So we can all kind of remember back to when we didn't even have a smartphone or even maybe a mobile phone. This has happened at an accelerated pace even faster than that. So clearly our fans are here, and we want to meet them here, and we want to deliver on the promise of voice and entertain them in this space. So looking at all of our brands, like I mentioned, we have Comedy Central, MTV, BET, VH1, but specifically Nickelodeon, we always want to stay true to the core philosophy of Nick, which is to make the world a more playful place. So if you grew up with Nickelodeon like me, it's the same as what you remember, right? It's super irreverent, it's fun, it's very playful. So everything we do has to reflect that philosophy and that mission we have for our kids. So kind of coupling those together, right, the opportunity with voice and our sort of brand mission statement as Nickelodeon, we see the opportunity to build a stronger connection with fans, right? So to really immerse them in the worlds of their favorite characters and shows, but then also, I think what's really exciting, what we'll talk about a lot today, is create a connection with their favorite characters and do that through conversation. So voice unlocks the potential for audiences and fans to feel like they're talking to their favorite characters, to their favorite shows. So we wanted to deliver on that, and that's kind of what drives us and what gets us up every morning to do these types of projects. So going into this project, I want to walk you through a little bit about how we approach the audience, which is kids, and then sort of how we designed the skill, and then we'll get into the demo. So looking at our audience, kids are a very unique audience, right? We learn a ton through user research with our kid audiences. And when we've done user research around voice, we've seen a few key characteristics here, which is that kids actually love smart assistants. We've done a lot of kind of global studies on all smart assistants and voice assistants, and they are big fans. They're actually, I think, within the family, the most likely to use the voice assistant, and in this case, Alexa is their favorite. I'm not just saying that because we're at an Amazon conference, it really is. So they interact with them a lot, right? And they're always encouraged to ask questions, fun questions, tell me a joke, tell me a weird science fact. So we're great. Off the outset, we have a lot of enthusiasm from this audience. At the same time, they're a little less formal, right? So they don't know the history of voice assistants. They came into the world with them just being there, right? So their commands aren't as kind of strict as ours, right? They're going to push the limits of natural language processing and understanding by being super informal about the way they ask for things. So we kind of have to design and be ready for that. And with that comes some great expectations, right? So in being so informal and being very natural with the way they talk to Alexa, they kind of expect the world back. They expect to have a conversation with her or with anything that lives on the Alexa technology. As a result, failure is really not an option for us. We want to make sure we're living up to those expectations, that we're delivering on that entertainment experience that they expect. But also, kids are in a point in their lives where they really want to be understood and heard. If you have a kid or you have nephews or you're a teacher, you know they get very frustrated when they're not understood. So that's really not an option for us. And Nickelodeon never wants to be in a place where it's saying, I can't understand you, you got that wrong. We want to be playful, we want to be fun. So we absolutely have to steer clear of any perception that they have of failing in these experiences. So how do we design, right? So designing for kids with voice, we have a couple key principles that we've followed. One, plan for a wide variety of responses. So even though we have some pretty simple questions we'll ask kids in the SpongeBob challenge, which you'll hear in a second, we want to make sure we're allowing for tons of different inputs from the kids, right? So a ton of different responses, building out our intent models to include a lot of different things, because they can say anything, right? And we don't want to say, hey, you got that wrong. We want to greet them and understand what they're trying to say. Interactivity should come early and often. So I think unlike adults, the patience for a kid to listen to a podcast for an hour and a half is lower. So we want to make sure we're showing them that this is also interactive, just the way they talk to the kind of OS level Alexa. This game, these products that Viacom is making are also interactive. So give them that moment to jump in very quickly and very early. And then making failing fun, and I mean really fun, right? So in some instances, we actually make the failure moments more fun than the success moments because we know a lot of kids are going to fail on this. Their speech development, their ability to enunciate words, it varies from age to age. So we want to make sure that when they do hit a failure moment or a moment where they didn't actually meet the criteria of the question, it's just as fun, if not more fun, and very Nickelodeon, true to Nickelodeon. So just thinking about a little bit about Alexa and the technology, but also the Echo devices, right? What you see on the screen there is kind of all you have to advertise yourself. There's no GUI, there's no visual interface to say, hey, there's a new SpongeBob game out. Really, there is an app, the Alexa app, but many kids aren't the owners of these devices and don't have that app. Their parents do. So we wanted to lean into picking the right IP, right? So SpongeBob is an iconic, super iconic, globally known franchise. So we wanted to leverage that as we started out in this space because, I think kids naturally might ask Alexa at some point for SpongeBob. So we can capture them that way at least, in addition to our marketing efforts. But leaning on great IP was a really key principle for us. Also, game mechanics. So Nickelodeon has a history of making games across mobile and console, so we wanted to use game mechanics that we've learned from that space and bring them here, because we know that keeps kids interested, right? Without that reminder, a visual reminder that they have this app or they have this TV show to watch, all they have is this sort of black tower in their living room or in their kitchen. We want to make sure that they come back because they want to better themselves, right? They have an incentive to come back and do better in the game. And to that end, we want to build daily and monthly retention and daily and monthly usage. So we've created some reward systems that you might hear a little bit of today because I'm doing pretty well in the game. And you can actually earn different badges and different status throughout the gameplay. So with all that considered, with the audience, with knowing a little bit about the technology and the platforms, we wanted to deliver the goods, right? So what is that? What did we build? So we built the SpongeBob Challenge, as I mentioned before. So if you don't know the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, I'll tell you a little bit about it. It takes place in a city called Bikini Bottom, which is under the sea. And sort of the centerpiece in the main setting within Bikini Bottom is the Krusty Krab, which is kind of like the Cheers of SpongeBob. So every character comes in and out of there. And that's where SpongeBob works as a fry cook. Mr. Krabs operates the Krusty Krab. Squidward also works there. Characters like Patrick and Plankton are walking through the doors all the time, so it's the perfect place for us to put the audience and the kid into the center of the action and really create that intimate connection with their favorite characters like SpongeBob. So the way the game works is it's actually a memory challenge. So you'll hear in a bit, but as citizens of Bikini Bottom come through the doors of the Krusty Krab, they place an order with you, the user, the kid, and you have to remember what they said and relay it back to SpongeBob, who will then fulfill the order. And it's pretty tricky, and it's really fun. So what I'll do is I'll do a little demo, and Zach might help me with this, and answering some of the questions. So here we go.
Not that you need help.
Alexa, start the SpongeBob challenge.
Welcome back to Nickelodeon's SpongeBob Challenge!
Pay attention.
The annual jellyfish migration is sweeping through town, and those jellyfish hunters are sweeping through the Krusty Krab. Let's get behind the register and get to work. Listen carefully to what the customer says and remember what they order. I'll be asking you a question about it afterwards. Check it out. We've got a real cool customer sauntering in.
Whoa, dig this cool clam bake, baby. Slide me an order of kelp fries, nice and greasy. Ring a ding ding, Junior.
Wait, did he want a kelp fries or kelp rings?
Kelp rings.
Fries, Junior. I said kelp fries. What a drag. This dive is Squaresville. I'm out like last year's trousers.
Oh no! Hey, whoa. Could I have a Krabby Patty and a small kelp fries? And a small kelp shake? That'd be amazing. Thank you.
What?
Was that a kelp shake or a seafoam soda?
Kelp shake.
Man, oh man, do I love my job.
Go, you! One left.
All right.
Ah, tartar sauce. Here come those skate dudes that say the word dude way too much.
Yo, dude, sup? Give me a Krabby Patty.
I want a salty dog, dude.
Right, and a salty dog. And give me a coral bit.
Me too. I want a coral bits too, dude.
Right, yeah, and like 2 seafoam sodas, dude.
Nah, dude, give me a kelp shake.
Dude, you're confusing the dude.
Wow.
Okay, Duderino, how many coral bits do they want?
2.
See, dude? I told you the dude had it under control.
Fantastic.
But your day isn't over yet. Here comes a bonus challenge.
All right.
Mrs. Puff is here, and she already looks like she's in a foul mood. Be careful not to upset her. If you do, she could puff up, and if she does, we could have a real mess on our hands in here. Good luck.
Hello. I'll take a Krabby Patty with no cheese and extra pickles. And please don't make me repeat it. The last cashier seemed unable to remember the word pickles. And frankly, it drove me insane. I've already endured a driving lesson with SpongeBob today, and I just can't take any more.
What did Mrs. Puff say she wanted extra of?
Pickles.
Thank goodness you heard me. You really heard me. What a relief.
And that's the end of the shift. Let's see how you did. 3 points. The SpongeBob challenge is hardly a challenge for you. You know, the fact that you're still here pulling shifts, that is a total employee of the day move. Go you.
All right.
You know, if you play again...
Alexa, stop.
Sounds good. Come on back to the SpongeBob challenge tomorrow for another shift with more hungry customers.
Goodbye, best friend.
So what you heard there was one challenge amidst 70 or so total. So this is intended to be an experience that kids spend several minutes with, several times. And the level of engagement, as Tim was mentioning, is significantly high, particularly relative to a lot of the other Alexa skills that are in the marketplace. So on average, kids are spending about 8 minutes on these things, and they're coming back multiple times. This is a significantly larger level of engagement than we're seeing across a lot of other things. And a lot of it lends itself to the fact that this is a really compelling property. It's a well-known brand, and these characters are super fun to engage with, but some of it is also due to the design of the experience. So I'm going to talk about how we approach conversation design and what that means to us as a business. So I came to this industry about 15 years ago, a little haphazardly, when I was living in England and working on a project for the Ministry of Defense over there, where we were creating an e-learning platform, but also developing content for soldiers who needed to complete certain courses to progress through the ranks. And we had to hire a whole bunch of people, including an instructional design team. And the guy that we hired to run that team was an academic who did his PhD in the early 70s on cybernetics with a focus on something called conversation theory. So this is something that this British academic called Gordon Pask developed. And the premise is, if you're designing an interaction between two individuals, and one of those individuals is not necessarily a human being, how do you do it in such a way that both individuals are getting out of that interaction what their respective objectives going into it were, and they're also learning about one another in the process? So if you think about that context in the early 70s, actually in the late 60s when he initially developed it, that was a super abstract concept. And in fact, the image here is something that he built in the late 60s to kind of exemplify what he meant by this. So this is those things that you're looking at were intended to kind of represent non-human individuals, and they were interacting with one another, but then you as a human individual could go in and they would be aware of your presence and they would respond to you. So this wasn't a verbal conversation, but this is a physical conversation that was essentially being choreographed in real time. And it was intended to be kind of a physical manifestation of these conversation theory principles and the framework that he had developed. The guy who's referenced here on the quotes attributed to, Paul Pangaro, he is a professor at Carnegie Mellon University in the Human-Computer Interaction Institute, and he recently recreated this display in Detroit to kind of celebrate the 50th anniversary of this conversation theory principle being developed and presented in public. Paul also happens to be an advisor of Xandra, so I get to talk to him about this stuff kind of on a regular basis. So that was the kind of the founding principle. What did that mean then when I was thinking about creating a business around that? Ultimately, it came down to thinking, if we were to fast forward from the 15 years that I spent after working at the Ministry of Defense to where we are now, we started to see this real convergence of hardware and software and user behavior. So whereas 15 years ago, we were basically just designing interactive stuff for browsers, now we have the ability to design interactive stuff for conversational interfaces that are, to greater or lesser degrees, being driven by artificial intelligence. And the way that I wanted to realize that in terms of our company structure was to find people who really understood how to craft and deliver really compelling dialogue, because ultimately the user experience in the context of these things really boils down to dialogue. And when I started thinking about what kind of the technology landscape looked like, it was really important to me that we are technology agnostic. If you saw the keynote this morning and looked at all of the different AWS services, it's essentially a utility that you can plug into now. So that was not something that we needed to worry about. And if you think about the user interface on top of that artificial intelligence layer, those devices that we're using now, including the Echo Dot, those things are shifting really rapidly. The form factor and how they're being used and where they're being deployed, that is moving very, very quickly. So we didn't want to worry so much about the user interface. What we were really worried about was the user experience. So whatever the AI layer was doing, whatever the user interface ended up looking like and how it was deployed, we wanted to make sure that we were creating the best user experience. And again, the people I thought were best suited to do that were folks who understood dialogue. So when I started building out our conversation design team, all of our writers that we've hired, I didn't want to take people who are kind of just generic creative writers, not that there's anything wrong with them, and try and teach them how to do this stuff. I wanted to find people who knew how to craft and also deliver dialogue, because ultimately dialogue is a performance. And you heard from the SpongeBob challenge that this is something that kind of feels highly performative. And also it can modify and modulate over time. So if you're on stage delivering a performance and you're seeing that you're losing the audience, or there's some other factor, maybe your co-star is kind of off their game or whatever, you modulate your performance. And so we wanted to use some of the AI elements to help modulate the performance in that way. So all of our writers are actors. They all have Masters of Fine Arts in drama. Many of them are professional voiceover actors as well. A couple of them actually have were playing some of the characters in the SpongeBob challenge. And then we wanted to pair those folks with best-in-class audio people. So one of the really compelling things about the SpongeBob challenge is being able to realize the characters using the sounds from the actual show and the voice actors from the actual show. That doesn't just happen magically. We don't just get a bunch of files from Nickelodeon and just plug them in. There's a lot of post-production that goes into that, but there's also interstitial composition that happens. So you noticed when we were asked a question and we gave the answer, there was a response right after the answer that indicated whether it was right or wrong. And those are place markers, which when you don't have a graphical user interface are really, really important. So to make people understand kind of where they are in the process, but also give them feedback in whatever direction. So being able to kind of compose those things in a way that are new brand assets, but are consistent with the tone of the brand is something that was really important. And then being able to have kind of in-house the capabilities of both that writing team and the audio team to be able to go from initial ideation with a partner like Nickelodeon all the way through to development, to post-production, and to delivery of the skill was really important. And ultimately, we've created a series of practices and processes internally within house that allows us to create these best-in-class things. And it doesn't feel like magic to us while we're doing it because it's just our craft. But when we hear it, it's still like I've heard that thing hundreds of times. It still makes me smile. It still makes me feel good. It still feels like a magical experience. And I was at reInvent last year, and we were demoing some of the skills that we've done there. And we had folks put on headphones, and every single time somebody put on the headphones and started playing the SpongeBob challenge, big smile on their face. And that's the kind of thing that makes us feel really good and is just evidence of how we've been able to create this kind of magical experience. Now, going from like an idea of, well, we've got SpongeBob. We know that we want it to take place in the Krusty Krab. We know we want it to have these gaming elements. We know we want it to be a memory mechanic. Those are all really important decisions to make at the beginning. And we work closely with Nickelodeon to make those decisions. But then taking that and then writing a script based on that, that's kind of the next level. And then taking that script and creating something that then lives on a technology like Alexa, that's really where a lot of the deep kind of design stuff that we bring to the table comes in. So what you're seeing here is just a sliver of what is essentially a massive flowchart. Amazon used to require, when we were doing like large submissions like this, that you had to do a flowchart. They're realizing now that flowcharting isn't maybe necessarily the best way to do it. It's a good way to look at the logic, but it's not a great way to combine the logic and the creativity. So there's other ways that we're working around that. But essentially, using this as an example to show you that what you just heard is highly complex and takes a fairly unique skill set to be able to translate a script into a logic structure and combine the two that actually feel like a creative experience for the people that are playing it. The other thing is that I've been involved in interactive technology for 20 years. Most of that was using graphical user interfaces. Well, for the most part, we don't have a graphical user interface. They're multimodal. There are cards and templates so that if you've got an Echo Show device or something else with a screen, you do see place markers of where you're at in the experience, and you get feedback based on that. But we're always doing a voice-first design. So assuming that nobody will have a screen. If they have a screen, great, it's a bonus, but you don't need the screen to be able to, so there's no hints, for example. So if you get a screen, they're not going to tell you what the right answer is. So we don't want to disadvantage somebody who doesn't have a screen. It's always voice first. So without that graphical user interface, It's a completely different mindset in creating that kind of path for the user. And what you heard was one challenge, and a challenge is defined, it's bucketed, right? A challenge is the intro, there's 3 questions, and then the outro. And like I said, there's 70 of those. But not everybody, and possibly not anybody, goes through all 70 of those linearly with the right answer every single time or doing the right thing every single time. So the real magic and the real creativity comes in handling those edge cases and what we call the fallback. So where people don't do what we expect them to do, or when we don't understand what the kid says, but we don't want to catch them in a never-ending loop. So a lot of that stuff, we spend more time on the non-linear stuff, what we call the happy path. That's like, if you were to do everything that's expected, that's the happy path. And that's the fairly easy thing to do. That represents about half of our design work. The other half is really figuring out what happens when people aren't following the script. And then the final thing is we actually don't have any engineers or programmers on staff. We partner with tool companies that allow our writers to be the people who are actually building the logic into the experience. I think that's another unique differentiation that we have where, nothing against engineers, but by removing the engineers from the kind of front-end creative layer and putting the writers as kind of the front end to the experience for the end user, that really puts creativity front and center for us. But those people, those creators, those writers, they also have to have the mind of logicians. So it's a unique skill set. It represents a bit of a hiring challenge. So as an example, one of my conversation designers has a dual degree from Yale in cognitive science and drama. That's exactly the kind of person that we want to hire. So if there are any of you out there fit that bill, come and talk to me afterwards. But it's a unique skill set to be able to think like almost simultaneously with your right and left brain. So this stuff isn't easy. We've spent a lot of time over years figuring out how to best kind of craft these things and working really closely with partners like Nickelodeon to kind of figure some of this stuff out together as well.
Great. Yeah, so I want to take you a little through what we've learned so far, both with the SpongeBob Challenge, but other kid skills we've put out in the market for Nickelodeon, and kind of how that pairs with Zach's discussion around conversational theory and design. Our first is really, you want to listen to fans and constantly reaffirm what they say. So part of that is, right, accepting a lot of criteria. As I mentioned before, they could say a number of things, especially kids might say something you totally don't expect. So expect the unexpected in that way and have a response for that. But also it's just good conversational kind of behavior, right? Just like any good conversationalist, you want to reaffirm what your user or what the other conversationalist has said. Especially Nickelodeon, we want to make sure that we're not being punitive, we're being fun. So that's been a big learning again and again and again. So highly recommend that if you're designing an Alexa skill anytime soon. The second is a really great learning that we've gotten as a brand, Nickelodeon, that focuses on kids and family. The Alexa devices and Echoes, they really provide what essentially is a campfire for family game night or family entertainment. So this generation of kids that are Nickelodeon kids now, they really enjoy family time. It's kind of unlike when I grew up. I feel like the general sentiment was like, I want to go to the mall, play with my friends, I want to get my license and drive and leave the house. The kids actually these days really love to play games with their parents. And they have their own devices often, so that's a pretty hard bridge to create. There's a lot, everyone has their own sort of tablet or mobile device to play games or console. So if you can bring them together, the entertainment value for all of them is super high. So as a result, we've begun design for multiple players and participants for all of our games for kids for Nickelodeon. And beyond that, we really want to design around, even if there aren't multiple players, it's fun to watch, right? It's fun to observe. It's just as fun to watch almost as it is to play if you're the younger sibling or the parent who doesn't want to necessarily get engaged, but you want to watch. As you could hear with the SpongeBob Challenge, the audio design, the characters are super funny. It's almost like watching the show, but it's interactive. You're really having a conversation with these characters. So a huge opportunity for us as we think about this kind of campfire environment for Alexa. And we've been lucky enough to get some really good feedback from our fans. So SpongeBob and Alexa, they really speak the same language. Fans love it. And as Zach mentioned before, our engagement is actually very high. So we have a suite of mobile apps against SpongeBob alone, but all of our properties at Nickelodeon, and the time spent and the return visits are actually higher in most cases than they are for a lot of our screen games. So very promising that opportunity to connect our characters to our audiences through a conversation is actually delivering, and they're feeling that. And we see that through their engagement and also through their store reviews. We're very, very well reviewed with the SpongeBob Challenge in the Alexa Skill Store, which is also great to see. And it's kept us going, right? So we're still keeping the conversation going with more skills. We've launched SpongeBob Challenge was actually the first thing we launched, and we've continued to add content to it over the course of the past year or so. We've also launched Around the Loud House, which is a big property on Nickelodeon. Ask your kids about it. A couple trivia skills, because we know kids love hearing weird and fun facts on these devices. And beyond that, our other Viacom brands too. We're really exploring all of our audiences and trying to meet them there. So with Comedy Central stand-up, you can hear tons of stand-up, hours and hours and hours of stand-up if you just want to ask for that. MTV News, you can get the pop culture news of the day. The Daily Show, you can hear last night's open monologue from Trevor Noah, interviews, as well as BET Breaks and hearing pop culture news from that community. So it's a really great portfolio that we're beginning to build, and we look to build even more and kind of deliver on that promise of really connecting our fans even closer to the brands and characters that they love so much.
So we've heard a lot over the last few days around the importance of machine learning AI technology into like where this stuff is heading. And it's not just us thinking that this stuff is cool and this stuff is fun, because it really is. And it's not just Amazon thinking this stuff is cool and it's really important. The industry is heading this way, and there are a lot of indicators as to why that is. Tim alluded earlier to the adoption rate of smart speakers relative to mobiles. Well, it's not just mobile phones. This, as a consumer device category, has the fastest adoption rate almost in history, right? So 4 years ago, there was no such thing as Alexa or an Echo. Compare that with going from 4 years where something didn't exist to now being in a quarter of all American households. That rate of adoption has exceeded anything even close. So the amount of time that it took televisions to get into that many households, telephones, personal computers, it took years, if not decades, right? So the adoption of this stuff is increasing rapidly, and the normalization of a lot of it, because of that level of adoption, is increasing rapidly, and it's driven, as Tim mentioned earlier, in large part by kids. So you've got kids now for whom speaking to Alexa is totally normal. It just feels like a natural thing to do. And so instead of having to pull your phone out of your pocket and ask, open up an app and text a question into a search box to get the response, you just speak the question. Or if you want to talk to a character, if you want a piece of news or whatever. Kids are just doing this naturally and intuitively. And so we're thinking about this kind of almost single generational shift where conversational interfaces have gone from being like a curiosity. In fact, they've gone from being a frustration to a curiosity to now just something that is normal and natural. The other thing is that we've seen a lot of coverage of there's the Alexa Fund startups out there. So there's money being invested in this space. And when you hear people like Mark Andreessen saying that voice is incredibly important to their outlook as Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital fund, and people like Mark Cuban, who not too long ago said, if I was going to start a new business today, I would do it around Alexa. Right? Those are some pretty compelling indicators of where moneyed investors and people who have been tracking technology trends for a long time are thinking. And then the other is in terms of, like I mentioned, the UI shift earlier. We're seeing that shift demonstrated in some of the purchasing trends as well. So some analysts are predicting that the smart speaker category is going to start outselling tablet devices in the next couple of years. So when you think about whatever you're doing in your business or for your companies and how you might be delivering that to your end users, I think it's a safe bet to say that mobile is still going to be a viable delivery mechanism, but tablets versus smart speakers, when you see that trajectory of adoption and uptake, it's really, really interesting. So I think making sure that you're listening to all of the kind of cool stuff that's happening, thinking about the cool stuff that can be done, and then thinking about how that applies to you and to your business is something that hopefully we can get you to take away from this today. And if you want some more information, advice, or whatever, Tim and I are available for questions now. We'll be around for the rest of the afternoon. Happy to have any of you talk to us about what we do as Xandra. And first and foremost, if you haven't already, you should definitely play the SpongeBob Challenge. And you can't say, because, I can't play because I don't have an Alexa device, because you all got those new Bose headsets, and they all have Alexa in them, and they all have exceptional audio quality, so you really get to experience the full richness of the audio design in that. So you've got no excuse not to play it, and give it a 5-star rating.
We could just spend the next 20 minutes doing that, actually,
Yeah, yeah.
if everyone just wants to sit and play.
Okay, everybody take out your headphones, set it up. No.
Yeah.
So happy to take some questions. We've got plenty of time. We didn't expect this to be an hour-long presentation, full transparency.